Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Marketing Roundtable, a digital marketing podcast. My name is Brandon Jones, and I'm the producer along with a paid media strategist, and I'll be handing it over to Brian Cosgrove, the host for today.
Hi, I'm Brian Cosgrove, principal at BrainDo and an analytics strategist, and I'm here today to speak with Dasanj Aberdeen, who is a product management and content leader. And Dasanj, if you can share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you so much, Brandon and Brian. It's awesome to be here. I'm looking forward to this conversation. So as you mentioned, a lot of my experience and background is in product management, some content, and as of recently, AI as well. So I'm looking forward to this conversation and diving in.
Awesome. Excellent. So today, a lot of our conversation, we're gonna revolve around data-driven storytelling. And so there's quite a lot to unpack here. Before we get into that, I think, can you just provide a little bit about your background that might help our audience kind of understand where you're coming from and where some of your expertise are where they come from?
Absolutely. So if I take where I am today, and if I were to look back and imagine, would I be here? Absolutely not. I would not anticipate, I would be where I am today. But it's been a journey that I've, appreciated looking back. So I started my career in accounting. After realizing that I missed some of the creative side of the house, I made that transition into consulting and started in consulting and project management, but then spent a good chunk of my career after that in product management. And as someone who has many different interests, likes so many different things, product was a good home for me and also exposed me to a lot of these, I think, different disciplines that we'll probably touch on in this conversation today. So certainly in product, you're working closely with folks in marketing, working with folks in sales and in other functions across the business as well, including managing stakeholders, like your business stakeholders. And in recent years, I've also spent some time leading content strategy and specifically around technology. So given the time that has been a lot of time related to AI. And then most recently, working with a team that is focused on data and specifically a Gen AI related product. And in addition to that, I'm also an adjunct professor teaching design thinking to engineers.
All right. Okay. So obviously you're heavily involved in the industry. You're working with lots of larger companies. You're working with different teams directly. You're also working in academia. So you've kind of seen some of these data issues, some of these challenges with communicating around data firsthand throughout your career. I think a lot of what and I know that you came even to speak with our team in Philadelphia at one of our web analytics events. And everybody found it to be quite insightful, but you used a lot of interesting visuals as you were kind of communicating things about how to put together more compelling presentations and how to make sure that a lot of the points are coming across. One of the issues that we run into is that in the marketing world and the product world, a lot of people, they know maybe what their KPIs are. They've got very straightforward dashboards. All the numbers are sort of the same size. They look the same way. They have buzzwords and jargon around them. And they're trying to communicate more important stories about what things mean to their management, but they get stuck. They're just sort of talking circularly and about some of what the numbers say and not necessarily what they mean.
Right.
Can you tell me a little bit about some places you've encountered that type of dynamic in your career?
Yeah. So, this is something that's so common, and it's not just in industry. This is something that happens, and I see that as well in academia with students. And I think one of the things for me that I always go back to, and I think is relevant to anyone, whether you have a product background or you have a design thinking background, is it's one thing to be in the details, right? And as humans, naturally, I think it's just part of our behavior. Whatever space we're in, we just have a bias for that, right? So if you're in data, you're used to the KPIs, you're always pulling, the specifics of that, you're working with your Excel workbook, you're deeply in the details. But when it comes to actually communicating that to someone else, you have to really think about, who is that audience? who's that person that this message will be shared with? And you also have to think fully from their perspective to understand, okay, what are they going to take away from this information? What do I want it to mean for them? And then particularly with business stakeholders, the actions that come after that and the decisions that need to be made also become really important, right? So just taking a step back, I think regardless of who you are, and especially if you're someone, very, very close to the data, this is what you're doing day in and day out, whether it's from like a marketing perspective or someone who's like a data analyst. If you know you have to communicate this with someone, thinking about, okay, what are they looking to achieve? And how can I help support them in doing so? So thinking of how you can support someone, how you can help them achieve something. I mean, that's definitely something that I've learned in my consulting career, because you're helping clients achieve some kind of an outcome. And if you can get clear on that, what is it that they need? Who is this for? If it's for a meeting, the other thing I ask is, what is the objective of that meeting? Who else is in the room? Do you have competing priorities, right? Because sometimes if you have a group of people, they all have their own incentives, they all have their things to accomplish. And if people are coming in from different departments, then you may definitely see that, right? Every department is focused on its own thing. HR has its goal, finance has its focus and purpose. So even in that process, you also have to think, okay, where are going to be some of the areas where people may have like rebuttals or confusion, and how can I proactively get in front of that? So, there are lots of different ways, you can get into it, but I think that's a really important piece of the communication that a lot of folks miss. They're so focused on the data in front of them that they don't think about what does it actually mean and who is it meaningful to.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Are there, I guess, do you have any recent situations that come to mind where, okay, a presentation needed to be made and,
Yeah,
it was at the core of what they're trying to communicate?
right.
Can you tell me a little bit about, how that went? Can you, just set up a little bit of a scenario for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
if you think about a scenario where you have, let's use a marketing example, for instance, right? You have marketing, you have content that's being created as part of that effort.
Mhm.
And going in, you know what you want to do. You know what your messaging is. You spend a lot of time upfront with the team, working through that process. What is the overall objective? Who's the audience going to be? What is the messaging? Whether it's brand messaging, and also just generally, what is the overall objective of that? Is it more? Is it would you say it's at the top of the funnel, so it's more brand awareness, or is it lower down in the funnel, so you're in a lead gen situation? So you work through all that, right? You get your concepts down, your ideation process, you have, design ready, you work with your writers, and your editors, you get all those things. And ultimately you have something published. And so now it's out there in the market. People are interacting with it, they're clicking on it. I think a lot of the times, like people sometimes miss that connection between, what am I looking to achieve? And then way down at the end of that process, how can I actually circle back and say that I achieved that and communicate that to other people who may not have been as close to the process? So what exactly are you measuring in that instance? Is it engagement? Is it comments? Is
Oh,
it likes? Is it just those metrics that sit on the platforms, like let's say a social media platform that you're using?
yeah.
Or are you actually interested in conversion, right? So are you
Mm.
looking to see how many, whether it's phone calls you get, or if there's a link for people to sign up, maybe for like a webinar or some action, whatever that call to action is there a clear path to measure what that looks like so that you can say, we invested XYZ coming into this effort, right? In this campaign. And here's what we did. Here's how it performed. Here are the specific tangible results that we got, whether it's in the form of leads or, follow-on calls, meetings for sessions and actual, some kind of, committed engagement, something of that sort. Because I think those are the hard metrics that, let's say, the business understands. It's in their language. It is aligned to metrics that they would be using. If you're talking about conversion rates, you're talking about revenue, you're talking about pipelines, things of that sort. So those hard metrics, I think, really make it easier to tell about the effectiveness and the impact. And so now the conversation isn't solely about the ideas. It's not solely about here's what we did, but now it's about the outcome and it's about the impact and it's about which channel is doing well. And it's about where do we want to invest more and in which channels and how do we want to, with the remaining budget that we have, how do we actually make a strategic decision to see where it makes the most sense to get the most value out of that overall investment that's happening?
Yeah. So what's interesting, I feel like, is that sometimes people are almost on autopilot. Like we've been looking at some of the same kinds of numbers for the channel, or maybe even across channels,
Yeah.
and they're missing, like, what you mentioned earlier about like the audience and what, the role in marketing that this channel is trying to provide. So they just start going with, these are just the numbers that we've decided were inherited. This is what they are. Up is good, down is bad. And they sort of like leave things surface level. And I'm wondering, how would we kind of compare that to someone who's taking this, taking a more intentional approach to data storytelling?
Yeah.
How might we have someone who's just like, yep, here's the facts. This is a 23%, and that was 5,000 per, or whatever cost per dollar. To what would a better crafted storytelling approach?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I was actually having this conversation within the past week. So I think in that instance, to me, level one is just replaying and telling what happened, right?
Yeah.
So you have your data. Let's say it's a survey, for example. You have your data, you have the percentages. You're literally saying 55% of respondents said X. It's very verbatim. And the thing about that is it's not something that is unique, right? Because someone who is removed from the data can look at it and see that percentage, right? Especially if it's literally the exact question as it was written, right? So it's very straightforward. But one of the things I think was that I learned a few years ago that really stuck with me, and this was in the middle of a project looking at product analytics for a company, was understanding the difference between data and insights, because those are two different things. So data is, again, that level one where you're literally kind of verbatim looking at what you see. To me, the insights is a level or two up. And how I like to approach that is to say, okay, even if you start with that level one, like let's say you're looking at a slide, for example, you're preparing a slide, it's going to be communicated out. It's and you want to summarize some of the findings from your research, from your survey. So on that slide, you start with, okay, verbatim, the 55% of respondents said X. And now you start thinking, okay, what else can I do with this? How else can I elevate it? How can I make it more interesting? To me, it's be able to answer that question and drive your audience to a deeper understanding or some kind of decision or an action that they need to be taking. So what else can we pair with that 55% and the result of that question to make it more interesting? So is there a reason behind that? Is there a why? Do we have some additional context that we already knew either coming in or that we can look at if we start looking at cross sections in the data to explain why that 55% is what it is? So I think the first question there is once you have the result is why. Like that's a fair question. It's manageable. It's approachable for anyone. Why is this happening? And then, if you were to take like a 5 why approach, for instance, and start going through that, you can realize that you can get to some more interesting reasons behind it, or something that's compelling, or something that's in the context of the audience. Maybe it's something unique to their customers, unique to the type of products that they're selling, unique to their industry. But it becomes a lot more rich when it comes to what you're sharing out and what they can take away from it. And this is something that's going to be unique to you, your experience, how you're slicing the data. And it's not something that your audience will readily have. So another checkpoint, right, in terms of delivering that for me is always, can I give them something that they don't have access to, they don't know, they don't have the time to find out. I think all of those things are ways that you can deliver something that ultimately is valuable to that end user.
Okay. All right. So we've got these different levels. We've got our level one and our level, like, let's say 2 or 3, the
Yeah.
enterprise level. Could you just kind of, like share like what would the delivery of like a level one thing sound like? So,
'Cause
when you're in a room and you hear someone just doing level one, you know, what does it kind of sound like? Like what would be maybe an example?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it could be literally just saying, based on the survey and the questions you ask, and you skip down to question number 17.
Mhm.
And question 17 is, what is the percentage of people who agree AI is important in the finance industry, for example, right?
Yep.
It,
Okay.
that stat in and of itself, like that could be it. That's all you can say. But if you can make it a little bit more rich, like who are you asking that question to?
Right.
Are they people who are actually using these tools, like AI, for example? Are they in a role in finance where they're actually interacting with this tool? Or are they far removed from it? So now their perspective is going to be a little bit different, right? Maybe folks who are already using it, you'll assume, and I think it's probably reasonable, that their likelihood and belief, maybe with some bias in there, that everyone is using it is going to be a little bit higher, as opposed to someone who, they may still be at the stage of learning about it. They're still working on their literacy. They're not actively rolling up their sleeves and playing with the tools. So those are some reasons why you can see, how the percentages would be different depending on who you're asking. And so if you're able to
Right.
layer on the context of that and tell more about the people and the respondents and where they are in their own journey, that can help you, differentiate between starting from just, repeating what exactly the survey question says and the response
Yeah.
versus adding more to it.
Yeah. So like a level one might say, okay, the among the finance leaders, generic term, right?
Yeah.
Underqualified, just generic. Among the finance leaders, 52% that said they'd be interested in using AI and in in their content.
Yeah.
My I guess that would be like a level one piece. And then it sounds like a level two piece or level three piece would be like, okay, among people in this context, this sort of like they're C-suite people in the finance industry. They are, generally speaking, most of them are CMOs and they're in
Yeah.
this leadership role, and they're getting a lot of pressure. They're subject to a lot of pressure from their company to determine, you know, if AI makes sense, all the
Yeah.
risks and other things around it. We asked them at this point in time, 3 months after like ChatGPT, became more mainstream, and certain headlines are flowing in about these different details. We asked them at that point in time how they felt about AI with the content program,
Hmm.
and these people said this. This percent of people said they were going to move forward with it, and that tells us something about what these initiatives look like, but it also like, you can even potentially contextualize like what they didn't say, like
Exactly. Yeah.
what it we don't know. There's a whole spectrum of usage that could be implied there, between
Right.
deep usage and more superficial research based usage. And um so that would be more of like a level two or level three.
Exactly. Because
Like,
now you're getting information that will drive a conversation, right?
yeah,
People will disagree or they agree with it, but either way, you're making progress in terms of now engaging people with the information that you're sharing. And I think that piece is also really important, right? It's you don't want your what you're sharing and your data that's communicated to just land flat. Like you want it to
right.
actively engage people, have them find it interesting, some new idea, some new concept that they haven't thought about, or even be powerful enough to change behavior. I mean, inspire people. Like data, when it's communicated and it's communicated the right way, has the ability to do all of those things and make us feel good, right? Like people love to have interesting data that they can share with other people. So even, this kind of brings us back to just a lot of the psychology and human behavior and how we interact, and especially on social media, right? You want to have something that looks good to share to your audience and your community. So if you find an interesting piece of data that is well presented, it's clear, you like the storyline or it resonates with you, it goes along with your belief about the world, your brand, it aligns with your industry, it is packaged up in a nice way with an infographic, so it's visually compelling. Those are all of the things that allow content or data, when communicated, to be successful. And if you're coming from which macro should I use, or how can I come behind and join these tables, and to actually get to that point where people are excited to share the data, like that's definitely, it's not the same kind of thinking, but it is important. And so you have to really make that connection. How do you want people to feel with your data, right? How do you want people, what do you want them to do? Who do you want them to share it with? Who do you want them to speak about it with? I think once more people start thinking about it in that way, you can see how important it is, and how you can actually start considering all these different things you can do to enhance your overall delivery.
This podcast is powered by BrainDo, a digital marketing agency that not only provides a diverse mix of digital services, but offers guidance, experience, and true partnership to bring your business to the next level. This episode is about data-driven storytelling, but we also offer expertise in other areas such as paid media, SEO, development, analytics, data science, and design, just to name a few. We've worked with businesses on every level, from local operations to Fortune 500 companies across a variety of industries. We have experts to strategize and execute your digital marketing needs, no matter what step in the process you're at. We're there for you, from wireframes to paid campaigns. BrainDo, experts in everything digital. Please reach out today to learn more about how we can help your business grow.
So let's talk about, you covered a lot there on visuals.
Yes.
And I think that's really a great place to lean into, because you said, if it's well presented. And then you had mentioned some things around infographics, which I think that might intimidate a lot of people who work with data on a regular basis, but we've all seen great infographics, and there's a little bit of a mystery on what's the recipe to put together a great infographic. What are your, what would be your thought process on, like, all right, this person's, maybe they've gotten to some like level 2 communication when they're talking about the data, but they're still showing like plain numbers, just plain old boring numbers.
Right.
What's like, maybe if we had similar, like what's like, if that's level 1, what might be like a level 2 or 3 in the visual department?
Yeah. So that's a good one. To me, this starting place is thinking about people in general and how people learn. So we all have different ways that we learn. Like some of us like to read, some of us like to hear something, some of us like to see something, but a good percentage of the population are visual learners. And even when we hear information, we sit through a presentation, and we don't remember everything. There's like a small percentage of things that we actually remember. Especially when it's written, right? We have a higher propensity to remember things when it's visual. So coming from that perspective, personally for me, I mean, I've always been, before I even started learning anything about business, I was an artist at heart. And that's something that's always really important to me, is to have the creative side of things. And so I also think about it from that perspective too. How can I use this opportunity as an exercise, even if it's in a corporate setting? How can I use this opportunity as a creative exercise where I am expressing myself? I feel like I am combining shapes and, different things to communicate a message. And it doesn't just have to be text. So for example, when we're working on presentation in my design thinking class with my engineering students,
Yeah.
Sometimes that's the first place that they go to is the text to describe, what it is that their product is all about. But I encourage them, are there different ways that we can communicate that same message in a simple, digestible way that's easy for people to understand? Because
Um,
remembering that if you want to go into a room and you want to present something, you want people to get the message. You want people to understand what you're saying. You want people to have some actions and some takeaways. So similar to in art, where if you're drawing apples, for example, you don't want to draw 4 apples, but you do want to draw 3 apples because odd numbers and number 3 has a way of just engaging people and engaging the eyes. Similar with the presentation, I will focus on, what are the 3 key bullet points? Not
well,
10, because
okay.
people remember 10, but 3 is a lot more digestible for people. So thinking about
Interesting.
so thinking about it in that way, coming from how people learn, how can we communicate things to them, taking into consideration people who are visual learners, and then looking to simplify. Because again, you've been with the data, you've been
Yep.
looking at it, you've been working on it. This is something that has been a project for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. So you've had time with it, you had time to understand it. But when you step into a room with other people, they're jumping on a call for 30 minutes or an hour. They don't have that background, they don't have that context. So, how can you use the time effectively to quickly get them up to speed? And they're not now questioning your data and wondering, okay, how does this relate to this? What is this number? They're doing the math on the page. Those are all things I've seen happen in reality. And to get in front of that, you have to have just very crisp communication and messaging and simplify what you have on the slide so that you can get people to focus. So yes,
Yeah.
you may have multiple numbers, but you can do things like make a font bigger, or
Yeah.
have maybe 2 or 3 numbers that you highlight out of the other pieces that you're presenting. Maybe you don't even need the text behind it, but you can use an icon to indicate something, right? So if you're talking about the finance industry or healthcare, maybe you have like a stethoscope icon, for example,
Yeah.
right? Or
Mm.
you have a stock market type of chart in the finance sector. So those are some things that can help you. Again, people will understand that, but you save space on text. You give them the option to just have another way to digest the information, and it can simplify and deprioritize what you want there for context, but allow you to just elevate the key things that you want the folks to focus on.
So this is really interesting. I mean, and you mentioned, your design thinking class, some things there about odd numbers sticking out more than even numbers. I feel like this is really fascinating because a lot of people don't know where to begin with that. I'm
Yeah.
curious. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people doing data and analytics work just haven't taken a design thinking class.
Yeah. Yeah.
Didn't even know that that might be so important to what they're doing. Is there a place that you would kind of like point them to get started? Like like if you were working with someone who just had absolutely no background in this, where would
Yeah.
they begin to try to think about, just these visuals and visual representation of the data being almost just as important as the data itself?
Yeah. So, I think 2 things. One is the visual art, design thinking, how do you bring all that together to tell a story? But I also think writing is really fundamental here. I mean, at the end of the day, this all comes down to communication.
It
Whether you're
does.
writing an email, whether you are writing, your own like performance review for the year, so many different things that we do. And in terms of communicating and sharing messages, it comes down to writing. So I think taking a writing course is a good place because it helps you start thinking about how you frame things. How do you word it? How do you structure messages? How do you structure an email to be effective? If you write an email and it's 10 paragraphs,
Right.
your audience is going to have a hard time digesting that. One, you have to think about how that message is being delivered to them. Is it on their phone? Do
Mhm.
they have time, while walking to grab a coffee on their lunch break to actually scroll through, 10 paragraphs on your phone? So do you need to be more concise, thinking about maybe I should leverage the subject line of the email
Well,
so
then,
they quickly know what I want them to do. Is it a question I have? Do I need them to take an action? Is it a follow-up? Like, am I trying to get some other clarification? Is it time sensitive? Do I need to hear back to them quickly? So those are some of the techniques that I use. And I think just, again, understanding communication, how can you message things as the foundation? And then I think you can layer on top of that, the visual or the design thinking aspect. I mean, maybe that's a biased perspective, but I really do think design thinking is relevant to everyone because even if it's, rooted historically in like a software development technology space, I use it all the time. I use it, to think about meetings, for emails, just in personal life in general, and interacting with people. You end up being better at understanding where people are and using their perspectives and enriching and using that in what you're communicating or what you're trying to do and how you're negotiating with people. Like those types of interactions happen all the time across lives. So I think those are definitely some good places to start. Is the foundation and overall understanding and elements of good writing. And then on top of that, layering visual elements, what you can learn about art, how do you actually position things on a page in your communication. And certainly design thinking can really help with the people aspect of that and understanding what your audience or your end user would need at the end of the day.
So that makes a ton of sense. So kind of building on what you shared earlier, it's people are sometimes starting at that like level one approach to just sharing the numbers.
Right.
And then we move into a level 3 approach where we're sharing more insights and context around it. Maybe we start to have these other puzzle pieces around some of the visuals, some ideas about how we might want to present the different pieces. But what you're sharing right now sounds like the glue that brings it all together is more about, it's the writing piece. It really comes out of writing. And so I'm thinking about, being in school, it's like, let's do outlines. There's certain essay structures. We've got, or if we're doing maybe a narrative thing, there's this like, what's the hero's journey? Or we learn all these like rhetorical things for emphasis, So I'm curious, kind of, if we think about people that are in data, they want to get better at storytelling. And to your point, storytelling comes from the world of writing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, how can we just, you're in the middle of your career, you're doing level 1, sometimes a little bit of level 2 and 3, like data presentation.
Yeah.
We want you to get, you want to pursue mastery in storytelling.
Yeah.
You want to get a lot better at this. What are some tips?
Yeah. And this is where it gets harder.
Yeah.
Because at that point, now it's not just dumping information. Now you have to subtract information, right? So getting to the point of simplicity, which is really, really challenging, right? Can you get to the point where you have something super simple on a page where maybe it's just an image, couple of words, and with that, people understand at least the basis of what you're looking to communicate. And then if you have the opportunity to speak about it, you can add more context there, right? So now, I mean, that's really the hard part. Is it's very easy to just, copy paste data as it is, like very verbatim. And again, that's where that level 1 is. But now you have to get to the point of, how can I communicate this message that has data behind it? It has the proof points behind it. So I can make sure that people have confidence in what I'm sharing and they trust the information. So that's another thing you're looking to accomplish there. But then have it also be in a way that it lands so they say, I get this. This isn't something I've seen before. This is different and it's insightful. And they want to jump out of their seats to now go take action to do something about this. And that action can mean, okay, let's have an additional conversation about this to get more into the details so I fully understand, because now I am, my interest is piqued. I want to get engaged. I want to learn more. Or no, I absolutely get it. Let me go and call this other person on my team so they can go start on this project so we can resolve this issue or take advantage of this opportunity that now with what you just shared, I understand. So that's really, it's not easy. And there are people, I mean, if you look at examples, right, people like Steve Jobs, when he's doing presentations, he's not relying on a lot of information on the slides.
Mhm.
And it's a combination of being compelling, working on your speaking, working on your delivery, to your point of the hero journey and a lot of those things. Again, if you look at storytelling structures,
Mhm.
using some of that in how you communicate, using some of that in how you frame your messaging can also be really important too, right? So people
Mhm.
understand upfront, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? How
Mhm.
am I going to go about doing that? Like, what are the actions that I'm taking? And what is the actual solution, or what is that recommendation? And then maybe even providing a little more context to say, okay, if I had additional time, here's what I would do. In a management context, in a leadership context, leaders certainly appreciate that, because you have to think again from their perspective. They're busy. They know
Mhm.
these things are out there and happening, but they're not into details. However, they have decisions to make. And so, how can you enable them and arm them with this information in a way that is synthesized, it is clear, and it is actionable, and they get it, right? So, they get it, they get the point, they can continue on to have a conversation with someone else, or go and make those decisions, or build a team, or approve the investment, whatever that is. So, ultimately, again, it comes down to framing things in a way. Now you're looking at speed, right? Speed is another important piece here. When people have limited time, limited attention spans, they have competing priorities, all these different things.
All right. So this is wonderful. Thank you for everything that you shared so far. We're at a point, in our uh, in the podcast here where we need to start to summarize and share with the audience kind of everything that we've learned so far. So I'm just going to state at the highest level. I know we've touched on, uh, a number of different areas, but one is just this sort of like level 1 to level 3 kind of just sharing what the numbers are to insight work. We've
Right.
shared a number of things around design thinking. Uh, you've mentioned, that this is worthwhile for everybody to go and investigate, to think about
Absolutely.
fonts and colors and but also even understanding some of these rules, these visual design rules that can make what you're sharing more compelling. And then you got into, it, really getting into what's more of a writing discipline, or coming from a writing discipline, just better communication on how to connect the dots between all the different facts and the story and the background and the context and the insights with the context of maybe the audience, which you began with.
Yeah.
Um, so uh, I just wanted to share kind of, with everything that you've shared so far, um, is there some advice that you would give to the people that work with data on a regular basis today on how to level up their data storytelling?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So, I think, and as I hear you describe that, we touch on a
yeah.
lot of different things. And
Mhm.
to sum it up, it's a lot of different things that you are touching on when it comes to data, when it comes to messaging, when it comes to storytelling, when it comes to people. And I think at the root of it is data is ultimately for people.
Mm.
People are doing the work. People are going to use the information. People are going to take actions from it. People are going to engage with it. And so I think the fundamental piece here is to remember just the human aspect of this all, right? We think of data as something that's super technical, and there are some people who, they'll run away from it because they don't feel like they understand it. It's too technical for them. And the people who are involved in it and engaged in it, I mean, this is their world, they get it, but then they may feel that the communication piece, they don't understand, they don't really, it's just not their territory. But at
Mhm.
the end of the day, it all comes together. And it all comes together from a perspective of, who are you speaking to? what industry is it for? What, things are people trying to solve? What actions do we want them to take? How do we want them to feel? So I think just remembering you're dealing with humans, it's being communicated to humans. It's for humans to improve things, to advance, to, you know, um, achieve their own highest potential. Again, all those things can be done rooted in data. And so having people, I think, to just step away from the technicality of it all and the details of it all, to just realize that at the end of the day, this all comes down to human interaction, human relationships. And I mean, for me, I think one of the biggest things that I learned in business, after school and working with different clients and everything, it's all about relationships. It's all about people. People do business with those they know, like, and trust. And the same thing here. People will interact with data when they feel they understand it and know it, when they feel like they can trust it and they have confidence in it. And there's an element of, them liking it and liking the visual, and it makes them laugh and it makes them smile. So I think that's really important here, is to not take the data side of it too seriously, but also continue to make the connection with what are we looking to achieve as humans for ourselves? What are other people looking to achieve? And I think just breaking it down that way will help us with the steps to get there, again, rooted in writing, rooted in, now you can start layering on the actual design elements of it, thinking, across the entire process of understanding people's needs and how do you find solutions that address those needs. And that's how all the pieces come together again. And to me, it's a very interdisciplinary approach. And I think everyone's perspective on that's going to be a little bit unique, right? Based on your background, who you've worked with, who you have to interact with. That combination is going to be very different. But at the end of the day, it is interdisciplinary, and it's a lot more than just data itself.
Dasanj, this has been wonderful. Your insights and advice have been something that our audience will definitely take some key points away from. Thank you for spending time with us. Learn more about BrainDo and our marketing services on our website, www.brain.do. If you'd like to see more from us, consider subscribing or giving us a follow. We can be found at Instagram at brain.do or TikTok with the same handle. Otherwise, we'll see you next time at The Roundtable.
Roundtable.